How many of you thought that you were a better parent before you became a parent? I think it's probably all of us, right? We all think of ourselves, oh yeah, we got that. And then we have kids and we're like, we have no idea what we're doing, right? One of those things that reminded me of this is our oldest son, Landon, he was 2 years old. And we had gone to Arizona to stay with some family, doing a little vacay with them. And they had a beautiful pool in their backyard. And so I told Tara, hey, I'm gonna take Landon with me. I'm gonna go outside and we're gonna clean the pool. And if you ever seen one of those skimmers with like the basket and the net and on the big pole. And so we go out there, but Tara's like, listen, you have to watch him like a hawk, right? I mean, he's 2 years old, doesn't have a life jacket. He could fall in the pool, he could drown. I mean, you really gotta watch. I was like, honey, I got this, right? I got this. And so we go out to the pool and of course, he wants to bend over and he wants to touch the water a little bit. And so I start cleaning and I'm like, hey bud, be careful, don't lean over too far. And I'm just cleaning and pretty soon because I'm cleaning, I'm getting further and further away from him. And all of a sudden I hear a giant splash on the other end of the pool. And I look and Landon is sinking like a rock to the bottom of that pool. Now, this is where the story differs. If you ask my wife or myself how the rest of the story went, she would tell you that I first tried to scoop him out with the net. I would say that I threw the pole down like any good father would, and with my clothes on and everything, dove into the water, rescued my son, and I still remind him frequently that I did save his life at one point, right? As parenting, it is a tough gig. Parenting, it is not for the faint of heart. And then on top of that, you add in, all the noise and the chaos and the hormones and the attitudes and the clash of wills and the financial pressure, and the list could go on and on and on. Not only that, but you end up with different personalities. Isn't it amazing? You can have multiple kids all with the same DNA and they're so different, right? How did that all happen? Another reason that it's really, really tough to parent is because there are new challenges with each new generation. And in my mind, I don't think it's ever been harder to raise kids than in the 21st century. It's ever been harder, right? My grandparents' generation, right, they weren't perfect, but two-parent families were assumed. Sexual predators were virtually unheard of. The biggest problems in school that they were trying to solve were kids chewing gum and tardiness. I mean, literally, that's what they got together to talk about. How are we gonna solve this crisis of the chewing gum, right? I mean, imagine if that was all that we had to deal with and all the educators in the room said amen, right? You wish that was all we had to deal with. Even when I grew up, right? I wasn't innocent, but internet porn did not exist. ADHD was just being diagnosed. And if you had mentioned the word sexting back when I was a teenager, no one would even known what you were even talking about, right? So each generation has its own unique challenges, and this one especially has some incredible hurdles to overcome. And in the middle of the chaos, it's easy to feel lost as a parent, to not know what to do, to not know how to protect your kids, to just throw caution to the wind, to throw your hands up, right? It's really, really tough deal. And I don't know about you, but for me and my wife, we're just hoping our kids don't end up on Dr. Phil someday. It's like, that's what we're aiming for. If you just don't end up on Dr. Phil, that would be awesome. And so today, we're gonna talk about boundaries that I hope will help us. And again, today, you may disagree with some of what I say, and that's okay. My job today is just to empty my cup, that's it. I'm gonna empty my cup with everything I've learned in the last 24 years of ministry, 11 of those youth ministries, seeing lots and lots of families deal with this. Raising 4 of our own kids, ages 7 to 16, right? We're in the trenches with you. My job today is to empty my cup and to give you as much as I know, and I'm gonna shoot a lot at you, and some of it's gonna be pretty heavy, and that's why we rated this thing PG-13, all right? Because we need to have some real facts if we're gonna guide our kids well. And the first thing I think it's really important for us to understand is this, that you are not responsible for your kids, but you are responsible to your kids. You are not responsible for your kids, but you are responsible to your kids. That's your very first fill-in. You are not responsible for every decision your child makes. You're not responsible for their attitude or every second of their behavior. They have their own free will to make choices. However, we are very much responsible to our kids. We're very much responsible to our grandkids, right? We're responsible for guiding them, for influencing them, for protecting them. And I think one of the biggest jobs that a parent ever has is to know how to set the right kind of boundaries for your kids. Proverbs 4:23 says this, maybe you've heard this verse before, one of my favorites. Above all else, In other words, this is really, really important. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. I want us to read that again through the lens of a parent. Above all else, guard their heart, for everything they do flows from it. Above all else, guard their heart. Everything they do flows from it. And we have to teach our kids how to guard their hearts. This does not come innate for them. They aren't born with the skill and talent no more than we were, right? We've had to learn how to protect our own heart, to guard our own mind. We've had to do that. Because the truth is, come on, we know this. If it were up to our kids, they would eat nothing but junk. They would never brush their teeth. They would tear the house apart and only sleep upon collapsing, right? That is what most of our children would do. And then after a little while of that, they'd wonder, why am I not happy? So as parents, we really do have to set in because our kids don't even know what's best for them. That's why God says it's our job to help protect them. This is what Proverbs 6:20 through 22 says. This is instruction, right, to our kids and how we're guiding them. It says this, my son, keep your father's commands and do not forsake your mother's teaching. When you walk, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will speak to you. That's what it's about. It's not about stalking your kids, right? Comes to boundaries. I'm not talking about becoming a helicopter parent. That's not what I'm saying. But we're going to do what Scripture instructs us to do. We're going to guide. We're going to watch over. We're going to speak. We're going to guide. We're going to watch over. We're going to speak. Because here's what happens. When children are given too few boundaries in the home, something strange occurs. They choose whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it, and then they find themselves extremely frustrated because they're unhappy. That's what happens. And that's when those of us as parents, we kind of throw our hands up in the air and, in frustration and disgust and think, well, why aren't they happy? Why are they so frustrated? Why are they so off? Well, the reason is your next fill-in. This is why we have to do it. Boundaries are important because kids don't always want what they say they want. Boundaries are important because kids don't always want what they say they want. This is so important to understand. Our kids, when they were little, they never once came to us and said, Mom and Dad, I would like to have a regular family dinner and a regular routine around bedtime. Never once did they ever come and tell us that. But how many of us know that they need it, right? They need that. Our kids don't know what they need and what they want. It's important. My kids have never come to me and said, Dad, Mom, I want you to monitor everything I'm watching and listening to. They've never done it. Or I want you to set limits on how much time I can be on devices. They've never asked us to do that for them. They've never once come and said, I want accountability with my schoolwork, or I want accountability with the choices that I make. They've never asked that. But we know that they need it. See, kids don't always know what they want. And as parents, sometimes it's easier, because we've all been there. Sometimes it's easier to just give in or give up because of frustration or fatigue. You're just tired of dealing with it all. But today I want to give you some hope. I want to encourage you to not lose sight of the importance of boundaries that you set for your kids, because it will pay off in the end. I promise you it will pay off. You see your next fill-in, boundaries today will create healthy decision-making tomorrow. Boundaries today will create healthy decision-making tomorrow. Because our goal as parents is not just to protect our kids, right? That's the helicopter parent that just says, I want to control everything you do so nothing bad ever happens to you. No, that's not our goal. Our goal is to prepare our kids so that when they leave our house, they've been taught through the boundaries we set, the instruction we've given them, they know how to guard their own heart, they know how to guard their own minds, they know how to guard their own relationships. That is the end goal. And it is worth every ounce of fight that is in you. It is worth every ounce of energy that is in you to help protect and set boundaries for our kids. How many of you have fences in your yard? many have fences? Okay. I would imagine if you have a fence in your yard that at some point there's a gate that swings open, right? And what does that gate do? That gate either is open and allows in all the varmint and all the pets and all the stray dogs, or it's closed and those things can't come into your yard. In fact, without a gate, your fence would be pretty useless, wouldn't it? Right? That gate is really important. Same if you fly on an airplane. The person that is standing, the gate agent, that's why they're called the gate agent. They're guarding the gate to make sure that if you don't have a ticket, you can't get on that plane. Their job is to help protect everybody that is on the plane from somebody that shouldn't be on the plane. That's why they do it. And you may not realize this, but the Bible actually has a lot to say about gates and doors. In fact, in the Bible, it's mentioned over 300 times that gates and walls were always meant and built for the protection of the city. And whenever those gates came down, the city was destroyed. And in the exact same way, you and I today are the gatekeepers of our home. And here's why it's important for us to remember. 1 Peter 5:8, I want you to read this through a parent lens. Be sober, be vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, goes about like a roaming lion, seeking whom he may devour. This is why we have to protect our kids. The enemy does not want spiritual health, emotional health, relational health for our children. And he will try all sorts of ways to attack our kids. That is why we must remember, our next fill-in, that we are the gatekeepers of our kids' life. We are the gatekeepers. We are standing at the gate and we are opening it to allow what we want to allow in, and we are closing it for the things that we do not want to allow in. That's what a gatekeeper does. A gatekeeper decides what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And your guiding will influence them for when they get older, right? They're gonna hold on to those values. They're gonna hold on to all of those things, even though I promise you they will not thank you now for it. They will thank you one day for it. For being the kind of mom and dad that are willing to protect them and set boundaries for them. So one thing that's really important around this is that when you're creating your own fence and your own gate, it's important that you don't compare yourself to other families who are building their fences and their gates. Because that's often what you will get sometimes, right? Well, such and so family, they don't have the same fence that we do. Well, my friend Bobby Sue, they don't have the same gate that we do. That's okay. I'm not worried about what any other family's doing. I'm worried about what I'm doing to set the right fence and the right gate for my kids, because one day I'm gonna stand before God and give an account for how I stewarded the blessings that he's given me in children, right? So we're gonna get out of the comparison game and we're gonna let God speak to us and set up those boundaries for ourselves. That's what your next fill-in says. We get to set the boundaries around them that will prepare them for the future. That is the goal. We get to set boundaries around them that will prepare them for the future. And the idea is, right, as you're strict when they're young, right, those reins are tight, and as they get older and show maturity and independence, you slowly release those reins to the point when they finally leave your house, you let go. But for many parents that I've seen, they just let the reins be loosey-goosey when they're little. And they wonder why when they're teenagers, they have zero influence or control. It's because we haven't taken that approach of saying we're gonna make things really tight. We're gonna have boundaries, and as you get older, we're slowly gonna help release these things in your life. And what do we do when those consequences are broken? Consequences, you're grounded forever. The rest of your adult life, you are grounded. I remember when I was 16 years old, and I got my license, and you drive around with that paper thing for a couple weeks before your real license comes in the mail. And my parents sat me down and said, listen, if you choose to speed, and if you get a ticket, there's gonna be a consequence. Are we clear on that? Yeah, Mom and Dad, you don't have to be worried about this. I do not have a lead foot, but thank you for letting my first car be a Mustang GT 5.0 V8 engine. I don't know what they were thinking. And this is my very first car. And so I'd pick up my friends for school, and they thought I was so cool and driving. And then I remember about 2 weeks into that, The day came and I got my license. It was the actual hard license. I showed my parents, oohs, ahs, I picked up my friends the next morning. I showed all them oohs, ahs, And it was on that day coming home from school that there was a bunch of traffic and I decided that I was gonna cut through a neighborhood to get home faster. And when I did it, I wanted to show off the muscle of that car a little bit. And so I gunned it a little bit and I came around this corner in the neighborhood and there was the police officer standing with his radar gun, just waiting for a 16-year-old from the school to be driving too fast through that neighborhood. And he pulled me over and I got my very first ticket on the very first day that I had my hard license. What a gift. What was more not fun was going home and telling my mom and dad that I had gotten a ticket on the first day of owning my hard license. You know what they said? Oh, we hate that for you. What a bummer for you. Because remember, A plus B equals C. Remember we said if you drive too fast, you get a ticket, there's consequences. So we need your keys for 2 weeks and you're back to driving the school bus. Not driving, riding the school bus. Please don't drive it. And you're gonna pay your own ticket, you're gonna figure it out. Right? Head hung in shame for 2 weeks, walking to the end of the street to catch that bus, and all my friends being like, what happened to your Mustang, right? I mean, that was no fun. You see, a fact of life that we've got to teach our kids, your next fill-in, is that our choices have consequences. Our choices have consequences. Every single choice you make, for good or bad, they have consequences. There's good consequences, there's bad consequences. And one of the greatest things a child can learn early on and carry into adulthood is the ability to accept responsibility for their own actions. And for Tara and I, we have been very, very careful as our kids have growing up to always side with the teacher, to always side with the coach, to always side with the authority in their life. And here's why. Because when they feel the consequences at this age, they're minor, they're small. But as they get older, there will still be authority in their life. Except it won't be coaches and it won't be teachers. It will be bosses and it will be police officers. And what I want to do is I want our kids to feel the full weight of their choices when they're young, when it doesn't cost them much. So that they don't learn that they can just get out of everything. And then grow into adulthood and think they're gonna get out of everything and then realize that the consequences are much bigger and much more painful. And then you're in a spot that mom and dad really can't do anything to save them. It's so important that we teach our kids about that our choices have consequences. It's so important. And I know it's exhausting. I know you say, but Ryan, it takes so much time to be on our kids and to follow up and to set boundaries and rules and consequences. I mean, it's just exhausting, and it is. That's why I have gray hair and bags under my eyes. It's exhausting. But someone read a quote once to me that has stuck with me for more than 20 years and has impacted how we parent our kids. And this is what it said. It's easier to build a fence at the top of the hill than drive the ambulance at the bottom. It's easier to build a fence at the top of the hill than drive the ambulance at the bottom. And I've watched plenty of families over the years that decided that they were just gonna be their kid's friend and they weren't gonna set boundaries and they weren't gonna set guidelines. And I've watched those parents through exhaustion or just didn't want to deal with it, not establish any fences at the top of their kid's life. And they've spent the rest of their lives driving ambulances for their kids. I've seen a lot of families that have taken the time and the hard work and they've modeled this for us and putting in the work to build the boundaries and the fences to help protect our kids. And I've watched their kids be healthy into adulthood because they know how to guard their own heart. They know how to make the right choices. That is what I want for my kids. See, we get to pick our hard. Both are hard. You get to pick it. You can pick the hard of building all the fences and boundaries and consequences and following up, or you can pick your hard of cleaning up after the messes. Proverbs 13:24 says, those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. It's not easy, but it's so important. And what that discipline looks like is up to you. But here's what I want to remind you of. Discipline is meant to be restorative, right? It's meant to be corrective to help guide them in a new way. It's not meant to be punitive for the sake of being punitive, right? What are we doing to help guide them towards restoration and making better choices? So your next fill-in, discipline works best when centered on systems and pressure points. Systems and pressure points. You know what your kids' pressure points are, and for us it was, hanging with their friends or devices or an Xbox or a special event, right? You got to find those pressure points and use them to your advantage. And you know what those are for your kids, so you have to develop that. The next thing I would say is make boundaries and consequences clear and understood ahead of time to help avoid conflict. Clear and understood. Because here's what happens. Our kids do something we don't like, and what do? We've never talked about it, and so all of a sudden we just pull punishment out of thin air, and this is gonna happen, and then the kid's like, oh, wait a second, you didn't tell me that this is gonna happen, and now we got a whole nother fight on our hands, right? A plus B equals C. And even if you gotta write them down and put them out, to say, right, if you're gonna break these rules, here are the consequences, or we will choose a consequence of our liking, right? When it maybe impacts you the most. But A plus B is gonna lead to this. This is what my parents did, right? They said, if you decide to speed and you get a ticket, there's gonna be consequences. And then when your kids get to that point and they break the rules and they make stupid choices, because they will, because they're kids, because they're not perfect, you know what we say? Oh, I am so sorry for you. I'm so sorry that happened. What a bummer. Because A plus B equaled C. And now it takes some of the heat off of that moment. Oh, I hate that for you. That's a good line. Oh, I hate that for you, right? Say it as sarcastically as you can. No, don't do that. I've seen families be way too loose. I've seen families be way too tight, strict. So a balance, right, of these boundaries and freedom is key. And it can be really tricky. So I want to give you some really practical things. Again, I'm just emptying my cup. If you don't agree, that's okay. But I just want to give you some things. And this is really important, especially if you have preteens or you have teens. I'm telling you, this is so, so important. I want to give you practical boundaries to consider. The first thing is this: put time and rating limits on devices, social media, TV, and video games. This is so essential. We ask the questions, right? Is what we're watching God honoring, right? What is it feeding their heart? What is it feeding their mind? How much time is spent? I would encourage you to set passwords. We have passwords on our TV for anything rated like PG-13 and above. They have to have a passcode, and only mom and dad know the passcode to it. Same with ratings on YouTube and all of those things. They do not have access, even if they wanted to watch some of those things. Why? Because again, we're trying to help decide what is feeding their heart in their mind. What's interesting is that the number one thing that kids need is connection. Connection with us, connection with their friends, connection with other family members, other meaningful adults, relationships. And what's interesting, and what the stats are showing us, is that the more social media use is taking place, the less happy kids are and the less connected they are. It's actually stripping them of the very thing they need in their life. I was so surprised when a teacher here at this school, he said to me, when I would come up, when I would show up late to a class and the room was full of kids, it used to be that it was loud and commotion and they were horsing around and talking and laughing. He said, I'll never forget the first time I walked into the room and you could have heard a pin drop because every single student was staring at a phone. None of them engaging, none of them talking to one another. See, this isn't just to guard their hearts, but what we're learning around devices and social media and brain development is astounding. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that children 0 to 2 years old should have 0 screen time at all. Elementary age should have less than 2 hours of all screen time. That's TVs, devices, anything. Currently, the average elementary age student is using an average of 7.5 hours a day of entertainment technology. 4 times the suggested amount. 4 times the amount. The average teenager is using 9 hours per day of screen time. And if they're sleeping 7 or 8 hours and they're using screen time for 9, you do the math and figure out how many waking hours they're not looking at something. It's not many. And then the question becomes, what are they feeding their mind and their heart with? What is it they're watching? What is it that they're taking in? What's influencing their values and how they will live the rest of their lives? There are many parents that have no idea what their kids are watching. They have no idea what the YouTube video is about. They have no idea what any of it is. And so as parents, we have to step into that world and we have to say, let me see what you're watching. Let me see what this video is about. Let me see what that's about. Exhausting? Yes. Time consuming? Yes. Worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely. PET scan studies of brains are now showing that technology use of more than 5 hours a day for kids is impacting the frontal cortex of their brain, leading to, don't miss this, poor executive functioning and impulse control. Poor executive functioning and impulse control. What does that lead to? It is why we have a mental health crisis on our hands. Let me just give you a snapshot of what's happening in teens' mental health since 2010 in the last 12 years. And these are diagnosed cases, not kids checking a box. These are doctors reporting diagnosed cases. ADHD in the last 12 years is up 72%. Eating disorders up 100%. Depression, if I told you depression was like up 10%, that would be a cause for concern. Depression is up 106%. Anxiety is up 134% among teenagers. Now let's move to major depression, debilitating depression in teenagers since 2010. For girls, it is up 145%. For boys, it is up 161%. And we could sit around and banter and say, what's causing this? But I can tell you what the number one thing is that's changed in the last 12 years. Social media and devices and phones. This is the first generation to ever be raised with them, right? We weren't raised with it, right? If you're my age, I'm 44, right? I mean, if you're around my age, you didn't grow up with devices. You didn't grow up with this kind of technology. I mean, this is the first generation that is really doing this. And even for social media, sometimes as adults, we have a hard time managing online bullies or managing comparison and all that. And our brains are fully developed. Imagine kids whose brains aren't developed and they're trying to process all this. There was a 9th grade boy just about 6 months ago. Straight A student, great kid. He entered into an online relationship with a girl. And over time, she ended up sending him nude pictures of herself. She was begging for him to send some back, and he finally relented. It was after that point that he realized he wasn't talking to a teenage girl. He was talking to a couple creeps online who extorted him and said, if you don't send us $2,000, we are putting your photos all over the internet. 9th grade freshman boy didn't know what to do. Totally freaked out, thought his life was over. Scrambled to get $300 and sent it to them. They said, thank you. If you don't send another $1,000 in the next week, we're putting your photos online. The kid walked into his bedroom and took his own life. I took that story and I walked to my 15 and 16-year-old boys. And we read that story and I said, if you are ever in a situation like this and you've done something dumb, I want you to know that you're never stuck. You can always come and talk to mom and I, no matter what you're facing, right? This is part of the talking to. This is part of the guiding. Our kids are dealing with things that we have never, ever, ever had to imagine dealing with. And here's the scary thing. The scary thing is that we are still a decade away from really understanding what kind of damage this is all doing to kids. Because we're living this in real time. Science and data can't catch up fast enough to what social media and devices are doing to our kids. In fact, just this last week, the FDA put out an article saying that 13 years old is too early for social media. Go ahead and put up that slide real quick, if you would, please. U.S. Surgeon General, 13-year-olds are too young for social media. A senator just introduced a bill that would make it illegal for ages 16 and under to access social media. They want to create a bill that you have to be at least 16 years old to access any kind of social media. Why? Because of these alarming statistics. Here are teens admitted to the hospital with self-harm. Since 2010, for girls ages 10 to 14 years old, it is up 188%. For boys, it is up 48%. Do you know why it's shooting up? Because I'm seeing images of other girls that are photoshopped, and they're beautiful and I'm ugly. They're seeing everybody else's highlight reels. They're seeing the party that they didn't get invited to. They're seeing it all and they're taking it in and they don't know what to do. Why? Because their brains aren't developed. When we hand our kids phones and devices, we actually have the potential to give them something that could kill them and harm them and hurt them forever. Teen suicides since 2010. Boys are up 109%, girls are up 134% since 2010. We have a pandemic on our hands. And for most parents in our culture, heads are buried in the sand, and we just hope everything is going to work out. But we are the parents. We are the gatekeepers. We get to decide what comes in and what doesn't come in. We get to decide the boundaries. So let me give you some more practical boundaries, because I got to move fast here. Have full access and control of their cell phone and computer. Full access and control of their cell phone and computer. That means you know the password. That means that you've discussed that you can go through there once in a while and look at what's happening. And some parents will say, absolutely not. My 12-year-old deserves their independence. No, they do not. I wish more than anything that ninth grader had a mom or a dad that was stepping in once in a while and could have seen what was taking place and say, let me help you, before he took his life. Custodial bark, those are two great things. We have a ton of resources at the bottom of the notes for you to take home with you today. It's a great parent app for phones. A dumb phone is a gab phone, right? We've taught our kids that having a phone and a computer is a privilege, it's not a right? You don't deserve to have that. If you're responsible with it, we'll continue that use. What apps will you be allowed, right? We've got to understand what these apps are. Even on my own phone, if Pax, our youngest, is playing a game or something, he'll say, Dad, can I download this app? And it says for, 12 plus. Well, he's 7, and I say, sorry, you can't for 12 plus. And you might look at the game and you go, oh, this is fine for a 7-year-old to play. It's not the app that they're rating. It's the advertisements they're rating. What advertisements you're gonna see in between his games. Right? So important to be informed as a gatekeeper. We started all of our kids out as they got to the right age with dumb phones. And our kids thought it was pretty dumb, to be honest with you. But that's okay, we didn't care that much. And so a dumb phone is that it looks like a smartphone, but you can talk on it, you can text on it, and you can send pictures and take pictures. And that's about it. That's really all you can do. You can take pictures, text, and call. There's no apps on the phone, no social media, there's nothing that you can do on that. That has worked out really well to help teach responsibility, right? And get them moving on that right thing. The next thing I would encourage you to do, no computers, phones, or TVs in their bedroom. No computers, phones, or TVs in their bedrooms. Why? There is a massive difference between public viewing and private viewing. Big difference. Our kids aren't allowed to bring their phones into their bedroom at night. They have to charge them in the bathroom. They're not allowed with them, right? The very first time that I saw a Playboy magazine, I was 13 years old. I was at a friend's house, and he said, I know my neighbor gets them because they come in the mail, and I've seen them in his mailbox before. He goes, so while they're at work, maybe we should sneak into their house and try to find his Playboys. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. So we broke into my neighbor's house, found his stack under his bed, stole one, knowing he wouldn't miss it because there was like a million of them. And we brought it back to my buddy's house, and we looked at porn for the very first time. I had to commit a felony to look at porn. Your kids and my kids, all you have to do is hand them a phone. And I am terrified. Tara and I talk about this all the time. I'm terrified for our kids' spouses one day and whether or not they're addicted to pornography and what that is going to do to their sex life, what that is going to do to their future relationships. Because we've given kids unfettered access to the internet, which is a wonderful and very dangerous thing all at the same time. You're the gatekeeper. Exposure to sexual things, porn, information they're not ready for, people who intend to harm your kids, we have to protect them. Next, I would encourage you, give them a consistent bedtime or curfew. Routine helps with sense of security, and good sleep helps them learn. This is so important. I took my 16-year-old to his wellness checkup, and the doctor only asked 2 questions. Are you looking at a screen too much, and are you getting enough sleep? We both looked at each other, and we chuckled because he and I both know, right, how crazy we are about screen time and you going to bed at a decent hour to get good sleep, right? These are 2 things that doctors are saying where we're losing kids. Way too much screen time and they're not sleeping enough. Those things are so, so important. Next, how they talk to and treat others. This is a great boundary that you're monitoring all the time because you get what you expect. If you expect little, you'll get little. If you expect much, you get much. You will not let them disrespect someone else. You will not let them dishonor someone else. You will not let them gossip about somebody else, right? How are you teaching them to talk to others and about others? And then lastly, promote the right friendships. Promote the right friendships. And this is the saying that has guided us: show me their friends and I'll show you their future. The people they hang out with, they will become like whether you like it or not. And you have to steer them towards the right friends. How do you do that? You make it incredibly difficult for them to hang out with the wrong friends. And you go out of your way to make it incredibly easy for them to hang out with the right friends. And you do this over and over and over again. That influence is so important. And I know none of this is easy, and you're gonna come up with other boundaries and more things for your family, and there's just not enough time for us to divulge into all of this. But here's the one rule regarding all boundaries. You ready? Here's the one rule, and it's your last fill-in. That rules without relationship leads to rebellion. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. And this is why what we talked about last week is so important when it comes to building a relationship with your kids. Because here's the deal. We have to have the relational currency to let them see our hearts so that they know that when we're making choices for them, it's coming from a place of love for them. Right? We build this relationship. Remember the graph last week with friendship and authority and how that ebbs and flows as the kids get older? So important. I want my teenagers to know that I love them more than anything on planet Earth, and I love them so much that I'm willing to set boundaries for them that they aren't always gonna like. Because I love them. And I know I'm the gatekeeper of what's allowed in our home and what's not allowed in our home. What's allowed on their devices, what's not allowed on their devices. It's so important. I'll never forget when I was a youth pastor, this is like burned into my mind, and I'm gonna close with this. A 10th grade football player, strong kid. At the end time, we had a time for prayer, and he was praying alone, and he was sobbing his eyes out. And I went down, I put my arm around him, and I said, "Hey, what's wrong? What's going on?" He's like, "My parents don't care about me." I said, "Of course they do. Your parents love you. No, they don't. They don't care about me." "Yes, they do. I'm sure your parents love you. They care." "No, they don't." Why do you think that? Why do you feel like your parents don't love you?" "Because they let me do whatever I want. And if they love me, they wouldn't let me do some of the things I'm doing." Broke my heart in two. They really do want boundaries, even if they don't say they want them. They really do need boundaries, even if they think they don't. And we, as parents, God help us in the 21st century. We are the gatekeepers. Can we pray? Would you mind just closing your eyes, bowing your heads? Father, I know, God, this is heavy. And it's just a lot. And I think, God, at times we just feel at a loss. We just feel like culture is winning in so many ways and areas. And at the end of the day, we want our kids to be healthy and whole and protected. And it's why, God, we're asking you to guide us. We're asking you to give us wisdom. We're asking you to give us courage in the fight, to give us strength when we just feel like quitting and giving up on all this stuff. Would you help us do our very best? And God, we know that's not always going to be enough. So, Father, in your mercy, would you fill in the gaps? For us. We need your help. We need your guidance. We need your word to guide us, not culture. And help us to raise kids that are emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy, relational healthy. And we're grateful and filled with hope that you are with us every single step of the way. That you love our kids more than we do. That you're with us and you're with them. And for every attack that the enemy has planned on our kids, I just come against that in Jesus' name. Every single thing broken, every influence broken, every addiction broken. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.